Hi guys, it's John from Android Alex, and this is a battery drain test for the Galaxy S21. So if you remember in my previous test last year, the Exynos 2100 just about beat the Snapdragon 888, only by a few minutes though. So it'll be interesting to see how they both compare this time. So on the left here we have the Exynos 2100, and on the right we have the Snapdragon 888. They're both running Android 12, and I thought just before the S22 series comes out, it'd be nice to see how these are both doing after a year's worth of updates. So the Exynos has been my daily phone for nearly 12 months now, and that may affect the battery life somewhat compared to the Snapdragon, which has kind of just been sat on the desk here waiting for updates and for camera tests. So it'll be interesting to see whether a full year's worth of use, or nearly a full year, will actually affect the performance. So like I said, we're just going to go through some apps and games here, and I've got the floating battery widget here so we can see they're both at 100%. We've got the floating temperature widget here, so Exynos currently on 23 degrees and Snapdragon on 21. And I'm going to use the ClickMate automator again just to automate a few tasks, just to make it a bit easier for me, and we'll just see how they both do. So I'm going to unplug these from the mains now, if I can do so without knocking the camera. And we'll start off the stopwatch here, so let's go into PUBG first. And I've made sure throughout all of these tests that the graphical settings are set exactly the same on both phones, just to make it as fair as possible. So we can see here I've got the macro or ClickMate set to run forward and just keep turning around. If you do join a game and you just stood there, then the CPU and GPU are not being taxed at all. So any tests where you see someone just load into a game and stand there doing nothing, it's not really going to be a fair test, because when you're moving around, looking around and doing things, the CPU and GPU are much more utilised than if you just stood still. So I think this is as fair a test as I can get with this sort of game. It's funny to see some chicken dinners. This was just against the AI though, and it was quite good because when I died it did just follow the next person in the team. Okay, so an hour of PUBG, and we're down to 85% on the Exynos and 82% on the Snapdragon. So the Exynos used 15% and the Snapdragon has used 18%. So now on to an hour of TikTok. So this is just constantly scrolling up and up, as you can see. And you can see there the Snapdragon gets quite warm here, up to 37 already, whereas the Exynos seems to be staying a bit cooler at 34 degrees. But we can see here that the Exynos has taken an early lead. It's winning by about 6% at the moment, so it's interesting to see the gap getting a bit bigger. It's gone up to 7% now, the difference between the two. Okay, so after an hour of TikTok, we're down to 71% on the 2100 and 61% on the 888. So that's a 10% difference between the two. And the Exynos used 14% during TikTok, whereas the Snapdragon used 21%. We can see here as we're in COD Mobile, the Snapdragon's still running a bit warmer. It has cooled down a bit, but it is seems to run consistently warmer than the Exynos in this test. But again, here we've just got COD Mobile loading up, and I just keep joining new games versus the AI, and it just runs around and spins around just to get that CPU and GPU usage up. Now I did fully automate the whole lot last time of joining games and doing all sorts of things, but I tried doing that this time, but sadly the ClickMate application didn't want to import things into the other phone, so I had to just do it manually for a lot of this. But yeah, spinning and running around is a big help, just to make sure things are actually being stressed as much as possible. So after an hour of COD, we've down to 57 on the 2100 and 46 on the 888. So the 2100 used 14% for an hour of COD, and the Snapdragon used 15%. So now we've moved on to Reddit, and this is another good one of constant scrolling and loading of articles and videos, as some of the Reddit posts do contain videos as well. So this is quite a good test to really put a strain on, the Wi-Fi and the CPU just for loading up all these different posts. Snapdragon has gone a bit cooler now, down to 29 degrees, whereas the Exynos is still up at 30. And don't forget, these are both running at maximum brightness as well. So you probably would get a bit more battery life if you weren't running at full out brightness, but yeah, I just wanted to really just compare the two CPUs to see how they're both doing. This isn't necessarily how you'd use your phone in a day typically, but I just wanted to see if there was a big difference. Obviously I've been using the Snapdragon a lot less than the Exynos, in fact a huge amount less, because the Exynos was my permanent phone for nearly 12 months. But after the Reddit test there, we're down to 45 on the 2100 and 36 on the 888. So it used 12% on the 2100 for an hour of Reddit and 10% on the 888. So now we're into Genshin Impact, and you can see both systems are warming up nicely here, up to 34, 35 on both. But we can still see this 10% gap in battery life between the two at the moment. It's quite a big difference really compared to the last test I did in May. And I didn't move forward in Genshin Impact, but spinning around is definitely enough to strain the CPUs in this game. So Snapdragon running a couple of degrees hotter. For most of the test it has just caught up, or the Exynos has just caught up to 36 here. Okay, so after an hour of Genshin, we're down to 24% on the Exynos and 13% on the Snapdragon. So just an hour of YouTube now. We're just going through a playlist, and we can already see here that the Snapdragon is looking a bit unhealthy at 10%, whereas the Exynos still has 20% left in it. It is running a bit warmer though now, it's gone up to 30 compared to 29 on the Snapdragon. Okay, so we can see here the Snapdragon is coming down close to the 5% mark, whereas the Exynos is still up at 17%, so it's quite an achievement here for the Exynos. They're both running at 27 degrees now, and here goes the Snapdragon down to 5. I thought I'd try some Twitch streaming here, so just to finish these two off. Down to 4 on the Snapdragon now, down to 3, 2, and 1. That's 6 hours and 13 minutes for the Snapdragon, and there's still 12% left on the Exynos. It's doing pretty well really, considering it's running at 30 degrees, just hit single figures now, we're down to 9%. This annoying extensions pop-up came up, but it is still streaming in the background, so it would still be using the Wi-Fi. I did set them both to 1080p as well, the source stream. Nearly down to 5% now, there we go. And when it did get to 5 on both, I did set it back up to full brightness just to make sure it did run a fair test. So we're coming close to the end of the Exynos now, we're down to 2%. 1%, and just over 7 hours the Exynos has finished. So we can put all of these into a table and just have a quick comparison. So we can see here that the Exynos overall was obviously the winner. It had 7 hours, which is 47 minutes longer than the Snapdragon. That's quite a large amount really. I wasn't expecting that, considering there was only a 5-minute difference between the two in the previous test in May last year. So yeah, the Exynos has beaten the Snapdragon here, 6 hours and 13 compared to 7 hours. And yeah, it's quite a surprise really. I wasn't expecting that at all. I think when I saw this sort of 10% gap earlier on in the test, I did wonder whether something was going on with the Snapdragon, but yeah, it did look like it just wasn't meant to be for some reason. It was constantly getting a bit warmer as well, which probably wasn't helping things. But yeah, it's interesting really, because with such a small difference last time, I was expecting a similar small difference this time. But anyway, we have got the S22 Ultras to look forward to with their 5000 mAh batteries. So I should get my Exynos variant this week, and hopefully the Snapdragon one not too long afterwards. And then we can compare the new CPUs with these old ones, which will be quite an interesting one, I think, personally. Certainly in the benchmark tests, it'll be interesting to see how they all perform. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do like and subscribe. You can always click on the join button to say thanks, and that really helps out the channel. And leave any comments or questions you have down below. I will do my best to answer them. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.